welcome to today's podcast. Tuesday, November 30th. Sorry we weren't here yesterday. First day back after a long weekend. And the podcast will be a little erratic as we go through the holiday season. Some of us using vacation time and the like. But thanks for being here today. Also, yesterday, there was not a ton to talk about. I even kind of struggled to find content for the radio show, which requires a lot less talking. It was a lot of tree lightings here, holiday events there. Nothing that we have to have strong opinions about, because Alex and I and everybody else both kind of laid low, with the exception of my Wednesday night party last week, which was a blast. A couple of things going on today that I want to share some thoughts on. We'll keep it brief here on the monologue, and then we'll get to a very mean and nasty person. Air quotes for that. This mean and nasty person asked to come on the podcast. It'll make some sense when I introduce who he is in just a couple of minutes. We had, I think, 4 regional area Vax 2 school winners, 2 pretty local. One was a UT student, Midori Ayers, and then an Alex Vargos, I believe is a Rossford student. They both won $10,000 to go towards their education. And I know kids say the darndest things is like a way old like YouTube thing from years ago or however long ago, but kids still say things that. So a couple of quotes in the story that Roxanne Elias did with those 2 winners at WTOL.com. One kid said, "Yeah, I wanted to go for it. That's a wad of cash." And the other one said, who was I think it was Midori. I think Midori said, they're taking chemical engineering at UT, which is a cushy major. I would not associate the word cushy with chemical engineering, perhaps like engineering in the kitchen, as in like making food, but very cool. That goes through this week. Lots of winners each day, and the deadline to enroll kids in that is tomorrow. I'm boosted. We got Omicron now. As I said months ago, I'm tired of hearing of Greek. I'm tired of learning more about the Greek alphabet, but here we go again. Some other things of note. There's a second location of a store that we should all have in our rotation, opening up in a place I'm unfamiliar with in Perrysburg. Let me find the address. No, I closed. Carinade Drive, the former site of a Kroger store that closed in 2016 in Perrysburg. I'm guessing that's the location that closed so that we could have the marketplace on Route 20. But discount chain, they sell clothing, housewares, and accessories. And it's legit stuff, too, like brands we're familiar with. KitchenAid, DKNY, Nike. So, athleisure, activewear, good place. You're thinking, oh, we're getting like another Home Goods, another TJ Maxx. We're getting a second Gabe's. What's Gabe's? You know, it's the store you completely ignore. Like it's the unattractive person, food, object, because you pass it so many times each year, each month, maybe even each week, because there's a Gabe's location 100 feet from where Target on Monroe is. But we look at it like it's just the ugly, deformed stepchild. Because, hey, look, it's not in my rotation either, because it certainly fits in with the TJ Maxx's and the Home Goods of the world. Maybe one day we'll get a Ross, which is just like those spots. But the center of the universe, gravity, the force of gravity, the gravitational pull that Target has on us and our debit card when we go to that location on Monroe Street. Yeah, I can understand why you might not have set foot. I literally do not know a human being who has ever mentioned anything about Gabe's. But now there'll be a second location. So enjoy that. Teddy bear toss was extremely successful at a recent walleye game. They collected for, I believe, Lucas County Children's Services, kids in need, 4,506, which it looks like was third all time, or in the top 3 for the Walleye's annual teddy bear toss. One more thing. Even non-students who have to go to UT for things, and I bring this up like I bring this up twice a year, which is about the amount of times I have to go to UT for something. I'm always careful to ask for, do I have a parking pass? Because I've gotten dinged before with parking tickets at UT because I thought I was okay, or there was a number off my license plate. No, they can't retroactively make it okay. Like, I don't ever want to use the N-word that ends in AZIS. But the UT parking people and that whole thing is wild and in many ways unfair. Some kids were protesting it, not many of them, like 15 or 20 of them, were protesting the parking issues at UT. Just a couple of days ago, this story was in the Blade. And they should, because there were parking issues long before they destroyed those 2 garages as kids were coming back. I've never known for there to not be parking issues. One of the quotes in the story said something about, we understand that there's challenges, especially with the garages being gone, and people will just have to become accustomed to not parking in front of the building where they have to go into. That's not exactly a great benefit that UT can offer people. Like, as you see, we have winter, and if I have to park 3 football fields away from where I have to go into a nice warm building, that sucks. I know they have the scooters on campus and whatnot. The parking spokesperson for UT also said they were unaware of any of the main challenges the students had issues with. What? Like, if you lived in this area and you go to UT once a year, you know that parking is a pain in the ass. Can you imagine having to do that every day? And those kids pay for it. Like I said, I wouldn't use the N-word, but it is a racket. Like I've said for years now, if you're okay sliding your soul aside and you want to make some money, open a university or a hospital, or be a highly skilled college football head coach, as those musical chairs spun last night. And although one of them might involve former beloved UT head football coach Matt Campbell, who has had a ton of success, relatively speaking, at Iowa State, but I guess he might be interested in coming back this way to Indiana to coach Notre Dame, who lost their coach who went to LSU. And it would be nice to see Matt Campbell. I know people speak so highly of him here where we live. It's something when, BG's head football coach from years ago, like 7-8 years ago, Dave Clawson. He was like several BG coaches ago. When BG was having some success, Wake Forest, I believe, is where Dave Clawson went. Yeah. And Dave Clawson has had some pretty good success at a university that has not had a lot of athletic success. I think Wake Forest was like a top 25 team for most of the year this year. Nobody says a thing about Dave Clawson. But it's not hard to find a place here where we live in our community where people want to have kind and praiseworthy things to say about Matt Campbell. All right, the other thing. I'm not demoralized by it. But there's a lot going on. The virus is ramping back up. There's a new variant. The Moderna people just said, we don't know if our vaccine will be able to manage this variant because of all this spike protein mutations. Just general things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis that we can't seem to find salves for. But this morning I spent 75 minutes with a podcast by Ezra Klein. I believe he does his podcast for the New York Times. He had on a guest talking about policing for all intents and purposes and how we make it better, how we augment it, how we reimagine it. And this guy really knows his stuff. Cited lots of studies all over the place. So there's real data there. And it was extremely informative. And without monologuing too much further here, so we can get to our guest, and I've shared this, I've tweeted this out. As Alex and I and others have said all along, the ideas that the city seems to be on the precipice of implementing by reinvesting in neighborhoods and community infrastructures and youth programs, and it's got to go beyond that. Like, if you listen to this podcast, getting mental health aid and social workers into neighborhoods instead of brute police force. Things that are not foreign to this podcast, topics we've discussed. So, and they also talked about on the podcast how here's the Build Back Better, and we're getting that $180 million. And we heard how mayor and other people want to spend that money. And what the mayor and his staff said was echoed on this podcast. So the ideas are in place. But just as there is some doubt with this expert on the Ezra Klein podcast, I share it as well. The ideas are right. We don't have enough data whether or not violence interrupters work. But it seems to be a sound idea to attempt as opposed to the alternative that we've been doing for so long and over-incarcerating and over-arresting. But I just wonder, even if we do so many of these things, how many years, how many decades, how many centuries might it take to undo some of the things that sadly have become tried and true and maybe far too punitive for the entire duration of this country's life? I mean, if you really listen to this podcast and if you read certain things, like we have done certain things all along, and over the years we've realized that they actually have a negative impact on society, but in the short term, they're what a lot of people want. The optics are good, but the long term is not great and erodes things in society. I didn't even think about this. They mentioned in the podcast one of the ways we insulated ourselves in previous decades was gated communities. I never thought of the aspect or feeling that has on people who are not in those gated communities. Some people in those communities are used to being put behind gates and bars. Now, gates are put up in many ways to keep them completely separated. One might say segregated. For me, a totally benign thought. You live in a nice neighborhood. You gate it just as sheer architectural beauty, not the optics of keeping others who aren't like us out. How long will it take to unwire seemingly benign thoughts like that, even if we can successfully implement all these programs to rebuild neighborhoods, communities, and young people so they don't turn into lost lives when they're double their age, which is 7 to 14, 14 to 28. How long will it take to unwire some of these things in our culture, which these things have been so embedded in for, again, centuries? A little over a century, maybe like 150 years old. That's how old that story is. You're familiar with it? A Christmas Carol. Scrooge. Paul Causman was on the show a couple of years ago, wanted to come back because A Christmas Carol is back, and they want to invite you to the run of the show. Here's Paul Causman. Paul, it's great to see you again.
It's wonderful to be here. Wonderful to see you again.
I hope you recognize the irony as well of two Jewish people during Hanukkah talking about A Christmas Carol.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, the story is very universal. I think of the story actually as it's about redemption. I think of it actually as a very Jewish story, to be honest with you, because, it is all about redemption and about learning the important things in life that we as Jews may have different names for, like tzedakah and Gemilat Hasidim and things like that. But whereas the rest of the community still sees them as charity and taking care of one another and those same things.
One of my questions, and I prepped for this because it's amazing. Do you know if you look you up, there's a lot out there on the internet. Nothing bad, but I pulled some quotes that maybe you'll forgot you even said. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you was. Scrooge and Dickens and A Christmas Carol is an indelible part of pop culture. It has been for maybe nearly 140 some years now.
Right.
My math, I needed math for that.
There you go.
And sometimes we just think of Scrooge is the old nasty guy.
Right.
And maybe some people think about the ghosts a little bit, but there was something beyond that. Like Charles Dickens wrote this with meaning behind it, and it's all about redemption.
Right. Yeah. It's about redemption and learning the important things in life. Scrooge. Scrooge doesn't think of himself as a bad guy. Scrooge is a survivor,
Yeah.
and he's doing what it takes to stay alive, as it were, to make his way through life. Unfortunately, what he doesn't seem to realize is that the things that he goes for are temporal things, that they don't really matter in the long run, and that he's missing out on the things that really do, like family and people and taking care of one another. Dickens is wonderful because he messes with us all throughout the story with time. You're suddenly in the past, and then you're in the present, your future. He actually will take you in past, present, and future in one sentence. He'll screw around with you that way. It's incredible writing. It's absolutely beautiful, but we think of him as just kind of the iconic bad guy, the Scrooge.
Bah humbug.
Bah humbug, right. But actually, there's a whole lot more to him than that.
It's interesting as you describe who he is, and now that I think back, I've seen so many variations of A Christmas Carol, the Patrick Stewart version.
Right.
When he was going through his peak of Star Trek always appealed to me. And
Oh, yeah.
obviously, I grew up as a kid with Scrooge McDuck, and DuckTales has come back around, but it's been twisted and portrayed in so many different ways. And the now thinking back to the crux of it is, it's an old guy who kind of overlooks things. And to be quite honest with you, and I know you know a little bit about me with this regard, I have sought out some new therapy so that I don't turn into that, because I don't have close family here by blood anyway.
Right.
And it reminds me to reaffirm my purpose to my friends in the Jewish community.
Right.
Mental health advocacy. And
Right.
you can make things important to you if you just open your eyes a little bit outside of maybe what life or the internet tells you that you should be liking.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's putting it very, very eloquently. I would like to get a copy of that, please.
By all means. By all means, it'll be on Amazon by the end of the year, $19.99.
I think it's very true. I'm like you, as I don't have family in the area and whatnot, and in many ways, this is funny too. I mean, we're talking about being Jewish, but this is a chance to get together every year. This is my 19th year doing Scrooge. And
Are you sure? Did
Yes.
you lose track?
I might have. I think I started in 2003 doing Scrooge.
I was going to ask you if it was your 20 or 21st, but you've been doing it a long time. For
A long time.
Almost half the life of this presentation.
Right, and there are people. And I was directing it in the '80s when the rep first started doing the production. So there are people on that stage who have grown up. Some of them have had children, and their children are in the show. And it's a wonderful reunion every year to get back together. As a matter of fact, the fellow who's playing Bob Cratchit this year, we've moved back to the 10th Street Theater for this year.
At the Rep, right?
At the Rep, for the first time in 30 years.
What was behind that decision?
COVID. Yeah, and we really needed to make a decision about where we were going to be back in March, and other places simply weren't ready to make those decisions yet, so we had to. So we went back to the Rep. I love it. It's 180 seats. It's intimate. It's you're up close to the audience. I can feel the audience, and the audience gets a good look at us. You can't. They can see just about everything, including the mistakes. But it's really nice to work in that kind of a environment. But anyway, so 30 years ago, or more actually, when I was directing it, the young fellow who played Tiny Tim for 3 years and did the last of the shows at the Toledo Rep this first round, he is actually now with the production this year, first time back at the Rep as Bob Cratchit. So it truly is like a family. And so for me, it's an important thing to go back to this every year and revisit those feelings, have the reunions with the people that I care about, and also meet new people every year.
What initially drew you to the role? One of the things I couldn't find on the internet was your performance background. How'd you get into all of this? And what drew you to this role specifically that you've been doing for a long time now?
Well, I came to Toledo as the artistic director of the Toledo Rep. theater. And so directing it, I really gained an appreciation for the play and for the book, the novella. And so when I actually cast Jim Rhodes in it, he was you might not know him, but he was an actor in town, and he was also on a television station for many, many years. And I cast him in the role of Scrooge. And when he did it for 13 or 14 years, and when he retired, they asked me if I would do it. And I said yes, because the idea of doing the show, doing that role had always intrigued me. I did it once, very briefly, when the fellow who couldn't do it before Jim Rhodes, he actually ended up in the hospital one time, and so I went on stage for him, and I was only, I was less than 30 years old, so it was kind of ridiculous, but but somebody had to do it, and so I gave it a shot, and from that day, it was like, this is something I want to do. And the advantage to me, one of the really unique things about doing Scrooge in this kind of a arrangement is as an actor, we don't get to go back to roles. We do them, and then they're gone. They're forgotten. I lay my head down on the pillow when the production is over, and the words drain out of my head. I mean, that's it. To do a show over and over and a character over and over again, particularly over a span of a couple of decades, every time I go back to that role, I'm a different person. I mean, I'm not the same person I was 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever. And so I find new things in it every time. That's something that you just don't get to do as an actor. And it's really exciting. It really gives you a different perspective.
I wanted to ask you that, and I think that was one of your quotes from what I dug up from like 6 or 7 years ago. Every time you revisit a role, you bring new experiences with you. It's like every time you read a classic novel, it gets better because you're coming back to it as a product of your time. That quote, do you remember that from 6 or 7 years ago?
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
I didn't make it up, I swear.
That sounds like me, yeah.
It's particularly an exclamation point, bringing new experiences to something, because we've all been through different variations of hell over the last 20 to 21 months.
We have.
We all might wind up being Scrooge when this is all said and done. What from your life over the last 20 months have you brought to this year's portrayal of the character?
I have never in my life had the feeling of isolation like I have had in this last period. We started working from home. I thought I would like it. I did not. I always say that I'm far too social of a being for all of this social distancing. It was really hard on me. And so, I'm actually able to draw on some of that because that's a whole new perspective to me, that feeling of isolation that I didn't really realize Scrooge had. And so I can come to it with a degree of honesty that I couldn't have possibly done in the past.
Having done it for so long, for a couple of different decades, and as you mentioned, younger members of people's families are coming into the musical now, or I'm sorry, into the production. Is it difficult for you to get, because you're a performer, chemistry is so important. Like I talk about like workplace chemistry, on-air chemistry, like you have it, and it can often overcome talent deficiencies. You've been doing this for so long. You try to change things a little bit here and there, year after year. Some people have been there quite a long time. What's it like to build new chemistry with people who step into and role for the first time? I gather you never get frustrated or Scrooge-like with them, but could you talk about building chemistry with co-performers?
Well, I'm lucky, I guess, in that I tend to like people just right off of the bat. People always start with me on the positive side, and then they have to prove to me that they're not somebody I want to know. So usually it's not very difficult for me at all. I like to get to know the person a little bit, find out some of their interests, develop a little bit of that chemistry with them, and then, play for a while at rehearsals. Play is incredibly important at rehearsals if you're all, because people have have to open up. Actors are incredibly vulnerable. I mean, let's face it, they're the most important part of the show because you can do anything as long as you've got an actor, but you can do nothing unless you have one in the theater. So, I mean, if all you've got is a phone book, you can, if you got a great actor, they'll make it sound interesting, So, but they're vulnerable because of what they're doing, and it's a bit dangerous, which is part of what makes it fun. And so you get to know them, and you get to find out their interests. You play a little bit and develop some bonding with the person, and then you go. It's honestly, it's strange. It's an intimacy that, if I can use that word in this situation, because it has so many other connotations, which I'm not implying at all. But there's an intimacy in that kind of working with a person and hopefully dealing with things very honestly between the two of you that you would maybe never deal with in real life with somebody else.
I want to ask you to describe what you mean by intimacy, because that's another thing that I talk about with my therapist, my inability to be intimate with certain things, and that's just like beyond relationships. I will ask you to describe what you mean by vulnerable. Do you mean just people afraid of messing up?
Yeah, people can be very afraid of messing up. You're also exposed. If you're doing something that's, particularly personal, and you're being as honest with it as you can be as an actor, you have the protection of being a character. But that vulnerability, or that exposure, I guess I should say, is still there. And let's face it, we all want to be liked, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're not, then the part of you that's been exposed is not been validated, and you can feel pretty bad about it. So that's why it's a little dangerous and why it's a little fun.
Do you ever pass along, because I'm sure you've figured this out, or I remember when I started to get more into public speaking, and this is even after years of doing radio, the people don't know you screw up.
Right.
As long as you don't harp on it or anything, or it's not something completely egregious,
right?
They never know. So do your castmates, when they make a mistake, you're pass that kind of insight along to them? Because I'm sure people will walk out of a show that you guys might grade very poorly. We're like, tonight was a C+ everybody, we got to step it up. Right. And the crowd might have loved it.
Right. Well, sure. I mean, actors know that, and you have to make a pretty big mistake for the audience to actually know. So as long as you've checked everything that you need when you start, and you've got it, and you go, you're probably going to do okay. Yeah, in that regard. But it's a personal thing, and that is, you want to be your personal best every single time you go out.
We're hard on ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And people say, well, it should be fun, and it is fun to do that. But the real joy in it comes from everybody working together as a team and doing a really great performance, and that. Now, I screw up all the time. I mean, you can't help but do that. You're human, but you still have to just, you've got to keep going. You got to keep your eye on the ball. You got to keep focused, and and giving a good performance and making a meaningful experience for your audience is what you really want to do, and that's where the joy comes in for everyone who's involved in the show. We're
talking about Christmas Carol, December 2nd through the 12th. You can get all the information that you need, ToledoRep.org, or use Google like everyone else. But please go see the show as it's back live again this year. You mentioned there's a streaming option as well.
Yes, there is.
How do you get ready for your shows? Because this is night after night after night after night. How do you get ready for this? Both in the long term, we're now a couple of days away, but like a month ago, how are you getting ready? And in the days that come ahead, this week, how do you get ready for the show?
Right. Well, you start with rehearsals, and you start with very basic things like, I go to this part of the stage, or I go to that part of the stage, and I say this line, and you do with the very basics, and then you start to work the scenes. Once you get away from the script itself, get the script out of the hands and whatnot, and you can begin to look each other in the eye and can begin to explore all the different things that are going on between the characters that are speaking, then that's when the real fun starts to happen, and that's when you can really work on a part.
I wanted to know, do you park in a certain spot when you get there? Do you have a certain meal, like a routine? Because We're performers, and even if people listening right now like don't understand that, you too are a performer because you go into work every day and you perform something, and we get into our routines so we can put ourselves in the best position to succeed. So like any quirky things, same type of underwear all the time, have to go through the same door, just little things like that because we are quirky, creative people.
Well, and it's interesting that you should say that because the theater is more than quirky. It's full of superstitions. There's
Break a leg.
Break a leg, and you can't say, the name of the Scottish play in the theater. Can't whistle in the theater. I don't know if you're aware of that one. Never have a Bible on the stage. It's just full of, even when it's supposed to be a Bible, it's got to be a book that looks like one or has a. So, all these kind of goofy kinds of superstitions and whatnot. What I do is really boring. I have nothing that's interesting at all, nothing crazy that I do. I have to make something up, but I would have to make something up. Really what I do is I go and I sit down at my makeup table. I sit down in front of the makeup mirror, and I just try to relax for a little bit, and then I start putting on my makeup. And when that's all done, the dresser helps with a costume or whatever, and then I usually just go backstage or someplace where it's nice and quiet and just sit and wait.
Are you emotionally exhausted after the run of the show is over?
Well, if I'm doing my job, I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your favorite part of the show that maybe isn't necessarily even Scrooge-centric?
Yeah, my favorite part of the show, I would have to say, doesn't even have me in it, and that's the dances and the choral numbers and the songs, because I love to hear them every year, and they're beautiful, and it's nice. It also gives me a chance to catch my breath and rest for a second.
Which of so it's Ghost of Christmas Past, Present, and Future, right?
And Marley, who visits first, the ghost of Jacob Marley, his partner.
Analytically speaking, scientifically speaking, which one is the most productive towards getting Scrooge into a better place?
Well, the one that does it, that finally gets the job done, I suppose, is Future. That's the one that's really hard because that's where he deals with his mortality. Mm-hmm. And when he sees what he's done and what, the consequences that his actions have had. And he's desperate, absolutely desperate to somehow make amends, to somehow change the shadows that he's been shown of the future. And so Christmas Future generally gets the job done in a big way.
Tell me about the stage director, Betsy Lackey.
Betsy's wonderful. Yeah, this is it's her third year. Now, last year we did a 35th anniversary DVD. But this would be her third year. She's a wonderful director. She's from actually done a lot of shows up at Adrian. Her husband, Michael Lackey, is a actor, and they've come back to Adrian, and we're very lucky to have her. She's worked in a lot of different places, and we're very lucky to have her at the helm.
She had some words about you. She particularly enjoys the scenes where Scrooge is caught in the act of being miserly. I love every time the play catches him in something mean or crotchety that he's done, and you see him think, "Uh-oh, wait a minute." I love the way Paul reacts to those.
I didn't know she said that.
Does she mean anything particular when she means something mean or crotchety? Because it's the general nature of the character. They're like little quirks or ticks that you've brought to it.
Right, yeah. Well, the whole first scene with him with Bob Cratchit in the counting house is kind of establishes his relationship with Bob Cratchit and establishes the fact that he is mean and crotchety and, those elements. And, I don't think of myself that way, and I suppose Scrooge doesn't think of himself that way, but sometimes it's really fun to play it. And I think maybe that's what she's referring to.
It's a great point about human beings.
Right.
We have one perspective of who we are and how we think we come across,
right.
And then everybody else has their way of how we come across to them.
Right. I love the villains. I really do. I love playing the villains. I've played a lot of villains, and they're great. They really are.
They're more complicated and complex.
Very complicated.
I think you know me a little bit. I love my superhero stuff,
right.
And they've all been through, somebody's mom died, somebody's dad died, my planet blew up, but the villains are the really, truly complicated ones.
Right. exactly.
What villains have you, other than Scrooge, have you played?
Well, I mean, I played, for instance, the antagonist, the bad guy in Antony and Cleopatra, which is the Shakespeare play. His name is Octavian, became Augustus Caesar. He's a pretty bad guy in that one. And I've played some other bad guys in various plays. I played Julian in Death Trap. He's a murderer. That's a bad guy.
But what made him become a murderer? And I mean that totally seriously.
Right, yeah.
Because I'm fascinated by like how people come to these horrific decisions. And if you walk it back a little bit, you too might have been like that person in the same circumstances.
Right. I mean, in his case, he's an author and he wrote murder mysteries. And so he's at the end of his career and he's in it's a horrible, humiliating kind of position that he finds himself in. He just can't write anymore. People don't care about him anymore. He seems to be cliched. He's lived his life because of everything that he's done as a writer. He's managed to be very closeted as a homosexual, and it's worked all kinds of really bad things on his psyche. And he desperately needs money, and so he goes after. Now he's sociopathic, so it's a little bit different, in the fact that he probably doesn't really hold the same sense of what's good and what's bad as most of the rest of us. But he's very justified in his own mind is what he's doing.
Yeah.
So, but they're fun to play, man.
Yes.
Because you got to figure out all of that background and whatnot. They're just great.
Last couple of minutes here, I'm going to keep you up too much longer. How much longer are you going to play Scrooge? You going to go for 30 years?
Oh gosh, no. I don't. I'm 64, so I'm starting to get into his age, so I'll probably play it for a couple more years and kind of enjoy it at this stage of my life,
For those that don't know, I think I put it in the beginning monologue here. We know each other a little bit through the Jewish Federation. What's your day job besides the night job is being Scrooge and playing murderers and villains? Right. The day job.
Yeah, I'm marketing director at the Jewish Federation of Greater Toledo.
For all 2,200 or so of us, right?
Well, all 2,200 or so of us, yes.
I saw the Chabad House do something. Was that at the mall the other day?
Yeah, every year they have their first night of Hanukkah. They light a big menorah, and this year I guess they had a gelt drop. I wasn't there, so I don't know how it worked, but yeah, they do.
If you ever question the special nature of who we are, the chosen people, whatever you want to throw at us, the mayor wore jeans and sneakers the other day. That is great power that we have. No, he's a good guy, and I was glad that he came out to that. And the Chabad House, of all the things that I've been a part of with the Jewish Toledo over the last handful of years, the Chabad House and what they do at the mall for year after year after year has always been a pretty neat signature event that I recall. And it's always neat when we have Hanukkah right after Thanksgiving, too.
Right.
You got bar mitzvahed, right?
No, I was never bar mitzvahed.
Really? What's your earliest Jewish boy memory?
Well, I came from a very strange upbringing, actually, in that regard. My first Jewish memory was as a little boy at Eli's Deli. And eating.
Where was this at?
This was in Akron.
Okay.
And it was called Regency Wines, and he had a deli there, and was it was my first memories of Jewish life were cultural. My memories were of egg bagels and corned beef.
We have a pretty good food scene here, but we do not have a Jewish deli where there is like Carnegie-sized meat in between two very small pieces of bread, where even after they give you a knife and fork, you still need a box to take it home, and I'm totally fine paying $15 for that.
Absolutely. It's a wonderful thing. You get 2 meals out of it, so it's not really that expensive.
Yeah.
And speaking of Chabad, when I'm was in New York, I would go to the deli that's right near Chabad Manhattan. It's about Midtown. Ooh, so good.
Like I said, it's
the sandwiches are this thick.
Yeah.
It's like you need a knife and fork.
We don't have one here. A couple places try, but it's just not like the Jewish deli that we're speaking about now.
Right.
Although we can just drive right up the road to Detroit, and there's tons of spots up there to grab.
Right.
What's your favorite restaurant here to eat at?
Oh, in Toledo, I've got so many restaurants in Toledo that I love.
Hit me.
Oh, really?
We love talking about food. We'll sit here and we'll do lots of social justice stuff and advocate for people, and then we're like, tell me if you like candy corn. I love doing this podcast. As you now can tell, like I was disappointed that the new morning show didn't work out for COVID things and otherwise, but it's great to be on in the afternoon, play some music, which is happening right now, but also be able to have this breadth of conversations. Mm-hmm. And as you've probably seen how podcasts have exploded and just life has changed so much in the last couple of years. But it's great to sit here and that we can hop from Scrooge to corned beef to your favorite restaurants here. What are they?
Well, I have so many. I mean, I eat at so many. I love Giorgio's downtown. It's great for dining and that, and they have some wonderful Greek food and whatnot. The mother there makes the pasticcio, and I consider myself pretty good at making pasticcio, and I have to say she just kicks me right out of the water. She's so good. I love that. If it's pies, I want Schmuckers.
Yep.
You can't beat that. So there's I love Indian food, so I love tandoor and I love jewel. Go to those. During all the way through the pandemic, we've done when we were doing carryout all the time. It was Fortune Inn over here for Chinese, and then tandoor for Indian, and we would go kind of back and forth. But gosh, there's so many good places to eat.
Mm-hmm. How about what's your spot for pizza?
Well, pizza. Okay, so I never had pizza until I grew up. So I've found that pizza is very site specific. Mm-hmm. If you grew up with it, that's your favorite pizza.
Yeah.
But my favorite pizzas in this area is certainly, because I went to school at BGSU, is certainly Pizzanello's. And then also, I like Inky's. I think Inky's is really unusual, particularly that one with the meatballs and whatnot. So I like Inky's a lot. There's Charlie's, which is right there across from the Jewish campus, JCC, the YMCA, that makes really good pizza.
I've never heard of Charlie's. I'll put it on my list.
Absolutely. I mean, it's great.
And
it's
Inky's
wonderful stuff.
One of I'll call it old world Toledo, old Toledo.
It is.
I've never been to it. I've heard great things about it beyond just the pizza.
Well, see, Inky's is like a place that I used to go to with my dad as a little boy called Guerreri's in Akron. And so when I came here and somebody said, who was from Toledo, who lived over in that area, said, go to Inky's, I went, this is exactly like this. It hasn't changed, in decades. And the food is just excellent. But, if you grew up in that neighborhood, there's no other place to go.
What's your favorite thing about living here?
Well, I love all the different neighborhoods,
What's your favorite neighborhood?
I love, I spent 28 years in the Old West End. I mean, that was wonderful. And the people there are incredible, taking care of the houses and the properties and whatnot. And could always walk over to the museum very easily. So, I really like the Old West End a lot. I'm very fond of Hungarian food. So there's a little Hungarian market that's over on the east side, up near Tony Paco's and whatnot, and I'm particularly fond of going over there. I like Stanley's market, and the Polish area in town, I think is really fun. It's gotten a lot of changes there on LaGrange over the years and whatnot, but nothing beats that Polish festival in my mind.
There's the Gaff, which is like the granddaddy of everything. I call it the Little Gaff, the Greek festival.
Right.
And then we have a lot of ones that are mixed in and out, but the Polish one is a can't miss.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really is good. What else do I want to ask you? favorite metro park or the one that you go to most?
Okay, that's great. I go to Seacolor a lot to walk. I go to Oak openings. Actually, I ride my bike. I take it to down in Maumee, the monument there. Well, I can't think the Fallen Timbers Monument, and then I'll ride the Wabash Trail out to Oak openings and go around Oak openings. I absolutely love Oak openings. I just think it's great.
You've been here how long now?
Since 1986.
Okay, things have changed a lot in the last 10 years. It's like I showed up and everything started blowing up.
Everything it started getting good.
Yeah, not good, but like I was very fortunate to get here in 2013, and like downtown started sprouting up around me so much so that I'm like, I'm out of here. I did my downtown life. What do you like about the direction that Toledo and the area is headed in?
Well, I love that there's this burgeoning blossoming arts community in Toledo, and I love the downtown. I love all the restaurants. I love being down there on a Friday night and there's people walking around. And down what is that, St. Clair Street?
That's where I used to live.
Yeah, I mean it's incredible, and I love that. I love Uptown, Manhattan's, Wesley's, places along Adams Street there, and the fun way the streets blocked off. I mean, I really think that the downtown is it's becoming really exciting. It's nice.
Do you get a little crazy during zombie crawl? You're mentioning Uptown and everything on Adams and blocking off streets. There's Paul stumbling. There's zombie Scrooge stumbling through.
You don't have to wait for the zombie walk to see me doing
that. One last thing, I guess you mentioned the arts community, and it's not such a diamond in the rough, or you don't have to look for it as hard anymore. But I had said as I got here, like obviously the museum is great, but if you spread beyond that a little bit, there was a really vibrant and very talented art scene, and I throw that art blanket over everything. We've got tons of murals everywhere, and that's kind of opened people's eyes up to the art we have. We've got the river wall, but I mean about as far as like musicals and performances. Like most of my friends are, I'm assuming a good portion of my friends are very upset at Sondheim's passing.
Oh, sure.
Over the weekend.
Sure.
And I'm glad that maybe it's the murals or whatever else, but people finally recognize that we have a really vibrant and large art scene here outside of just local music and the art museum.
Right. Well, when I was started here in Toledo in '86, as far as theater was concerned, there may have been a couple of suburban theaters that were starting out, but truly, there was really just the Toledo Rep and the Village Players. And since then, a lot of smaller theater companies have come up. And it's great because people get an opportunity. I mean, when you've only got two theaters, there's only so much that's available in terms of the artists, what they can do, the actors and set designers, lighting designers and painters and all of the people who are involved, because it's very collaborative art. But there's still only so much that's available. Well, if the more theaters that are available, the more chances you have of getting some experience and, developing your craft or your art. And it's wonderful. And the more chances that people will come see it.
Yeah.
So
it was kind of weird to see a couple of weeks ago. I have a lot of friends at TSA. You know Dave Gerke, right?
I know that. I don't know him personally.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. I have a lot of friends over at TSA, so I'm always happy to promote what they're doing. And I was confused a couple of times, like as we had a swarm of performances coming back. I was trying to figure out, is that in Toledo or is that at the Croswell? And TSA, their kids did Anastasia at Owens. And then I had mentioned on the air, I was like, I know people were interested in seeing that. But if you missed it at Owens, I think it was at the Croswell not that much later, right?
Right, yeah.
So many places now to be a part of and enjoy the arts here.
Right, exactly. And that's good for us.
Yeah.
That's good for Toledo. I mean, we have larger and larger audiences, and that means more people supporting the arts, more people enjoying them, and more opportunity for the artists. So that's a really good thing.
Paul Causman, Scrooge, marketing director for my friends at the Jewish Federation at the Rep, ToledoRep.org. All this will be in the post for the podcast, but it's December 2nd through the 12th. I would say break a leg, but that sounds so cliche. Be mean to some people.
Okay.
All right, perfect.
No problem.
Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's great to see you again. Really appreciate it.